I said, we'll have a recording of it and we can roll from there. So.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
All right.
Well, let me know when you're ready for me to roll with the intro.
Go for it.
All right. Well, for those that are on today, we've got an excellent professional doing our presentation. Datron Branch, who's the CEO of Branch Farms, is on today. Datron is a cultivator, processing, and manufacturing professional with over 20 years of experience in the industry. And so Datron is going to share some very interesting information with us today that I think you will find to be riveting in terms of a discussion. Datron, I'm going to put you on, partner, and let you excite and ignite the folks out here in the audience.
All right, good deal, good deal. Well, hello everyone. I hope everyone's been having a good week and a good holiday season. You know, John, you know, obviously you're in our prayers and everything, and I believe it's Mr. Bartlett, is it?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good deal, man. We'll make sure we, you know, add your brother into our prayers as well, man. As we all
Truly appreciate that.
Yep, we all know how COVID is, and you know, we're all in this together. So, with that said, what I'm going to be doing today is kind of just discussing the journey of the growing season as it pertains to hemp. We'll kind of talk about some things that you probably already know, some things that you may not, you know, be aware of. It's kind of like a general overview of the growing season. Obviously, there's different, you know, tangents and tentacles or veins, I should say, to each of these. But as an overview of things that you definitely may need to know and look out for, we'll kind of go over those today. You'll see them right there to the left on the screen. Preparation, the planting stage, vegetative stage, flowering stage, and the harvest stage of the crop, as well as things that you need to do post-harvest. So without delay, moving forward, as far as preparation, we're talking about season preparation, right? So, you know, details, schmeetails, it's time to roll. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, you're sold on something that you really don't know everything about, or, you know, what you're getting into, but then it's go time. We don't want anyone in that situation. So the first thing I would definitely suggest is that, you know, you get some legit consultation. That's always important. You know what I'm saying? You don't want to end up, you know, letting somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, you know, kind of, you know, talk to you here and there as you're already into the planting season and so forth, because they could drag you all sorts of ways and you're not on any consistent plan at all. And the next thing you know, you're on the road to disaster. So, you know, you definitely want to have, you know, a co-pilot right there with you, you know, along this journey with you, to help you navigate a lot of the different things that you could run into, you know, along this whole journey and this trip that you're going to be on. So legit consultation is always the first thing that you want to make sure that you have, you know, right there in your pocket. That person will also help you, the person that's responsible for growing, with getting your state licenses, helping you set goals, budgeting. You know, those things are very important when we're talking about preparing for the season, because you need to be basically prepared in these three main areas for sure before we even start talking about putting a plant into the ground. So these are some of the main things that we do within our network of farmers that we have in Arkansas. We had 14 this year, rounded it off with 15, including ourselves. So these are things that, you know, we want to make sure that we definitely did. Outside of that, some of the things that you want to do is obviously have great land. All right. So, you know, sandy loam sand is what we pretty much have, you know, in our area in the southeast portion of the state of Arkansas in the Delta region. However, you know, sandy loam sand, you know, can be found in many different places. And even if you don't have sandy loam sand, you definitely want to be on hilly areas where the water runs off very well. So with that said, outside of the terrain of land, You also want to get your, soil sample and water source testing. So whatever water source you're using, whether it's a well or even, your hydrant on the side of the house, we've seen those operations as well. You definitely want to make sure that you're getting that water tested, because that's exactly what's going to the plant, obviously. So we want to make sure that we're starting off on the right foot. We aren't shooting ourselves in the foot right off the bat, with our crop, where it's no good at the end of harvest, because that stuff will come out in the final testing. Outside of that, you need a plant source. What kind of plants are you going with? What type of varieties are you going with? That's very important, because you don't want to just buy anything, grow it, and then, try to take it to market. You need to know what the market is desiring, before you put a plant in the ground. And you need to have a great source of plants, meaning, getting feminized seeds. Most people are gonna, have a rate of around 99.9% feminized seeds. So, you want to make sure that you're at least getting that with your genetics, and also just getting some great overall all-around plants. The reason we say 99% feminized seeds is because one male plant can destroy your whole crop, and it definitely can affect a huge area that it's around. It could affect, literally 2 or 3 acres at a time. So you definitely want to get great plants. The other thing you want to do is secure your labor. All right. So we know that, when we're getting these great plants, as you can see these root balls on these plants, those roots are going nuts right there. That's some proprietary things that we do to make sure that these plants are ready to go when they get into the ground and just ready to boom. If you look at, this field right here, we put all of our plants on raised beds. A couple of good benefits to doing this, of course, when you're putting your plants on raised beds, you're kind of eliminating a lot of the risks that come along with, rainstorms. For instance, this year we had, the 2 hurricanes back to back, a lot of crop damage. So, heavy rains and storms like that can really destroy your crop. You want to definitely have them on raised beds. Another reason why we put them on raised beds is because we can do drip line irrigation. So obviously when we're feeding these plants, we want to make sure that we're getting them, the ample amount of nutrients to each plant. And we want that soil to be moist and warm, where those, roots can really, spread out and do what they need to do. Because as you may very well know, just like any other plants, whatever's happening below the ground is going to affect what's happening above the ground. So we want those roots to be very strong and continue to branch so that plant can really perform and put on a lot of weight. So outside of that, your watering system, having your plants on beds, you definitely got to have the labor, a big thing. So don't try to take on, 5,000 plants by yourself or with 2 other people. You're going to need some folks for that. So rule of thumb, you need 3 people per acre, and you won't need them like on a daily basis, but there are certain stages when you'll need those particular people and those hands out there in the field, because this is a hand crop. Nothing that you're going to be able to just put in the ground and walk away. So last but not least, equipment and supplies. So, you won't need a lot of fertilizer. These plants will need water outside of the natural rain and precipitation that they'll be getting, outside. But, you need that fertilizer. We use Miracle Grow a couple of times on our plants. We don't do a lot of fertilization because of what we do to the plants, the seedlings. So we don't have to overcompensate when they're in the ground during the vegetation stage at all. So other supplies that you'll need is kind of like a mulch land machine or access to one. And then you need to get your plastic and your drip line. And the reason that you want to make sure you do all these things is because, you actually get paid by the USDA to actually put down your drip line and irrigation system. So just another reason to look into putting your hemp on raised beds. So when we get to the planting, the good part, the fun part, again, make sure your labor is already in place. You already got you're ready to go. and you're getting them on raised beds. We know the benefits of that. Now it's really all about field monitoring, maintenance, feeding regimen, and watering routine. So to kind of hit a few key points there. When those plants are seedlings or babies, you don't want to feed them like they're adults. You really got to treat these plants like they're little people, right? So obviously, you don't want to over feed these plants, and you don't want to overwater them as well, because you can really drown them out, which is, again, I'm reinforcing, putting them on raised beds. We don't want those things to drown out. So you want to make sure that, you're able to get them, a consistent amount of proper water supply that they're supposed to be getting at each stage. So during the planting stage, you want to just make sure those plants are sitting upright when you put them in the ground. And you definitely want to do your pruning. So this is how a plant will look in the vegetation stage. As you can see, it's putting on leaves. What you really want to do at this point is prune those leaves off. If you've raised tomatoes before, you know about sucker leaves. The reason why you want to prune those leaves off is because they're taking the nutrients away from the actual buds, okay? So what we want to do is make sure that we take those leaves off and make sure that, the CBD and those other properties are really increasing and the nutrients are going to the buds of the plant. So making sure that you're pruning and doing proper, maintenance of the plant in that regard, very, very, very important during the vegetation stage. As far as routine feeding, usually give them, a good feeding of Miracle Grow right around that time. Now, there's a lot of different concoctions out there. Everybody's got a different growing formula. They've all pretty much got pretty much the same thing in there. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that we're boosting. The main ingredient is going to be nitrogen that we're pushing to these plants. That's really going to make those plants take off. Now, when you're doing that, you're actually putting a lot of vegetation on the plants. So that's good. So what does that mean? We don't want to put a lot of Miracle Grow on these plants during the full vegetation stage, and definitely not during the flowering stage, because number one, less pruning that you'll have to do on the back end, but you definitely want to make sure that you can take those leaves off and that those nutrients are going exactly where they need to go. Outside of that, with proper field maintenance, you want to make sure that you're looking out for, those pests like worms that could just really destroy your hope. Usually we call them cutworms, army worms. These little dudes can really destroy your field, in a matter of days. So one of the simple remedies that we use are ladybugs. Outside of the natural organic sprays that are out there, I'll be honest with you, regardless of how organic and natural these pest sprays are, you do have to stay within compliance federally, because this is something that's going to be consumed. So ladybugs has really been doing the job for us. They'll eat the aphids. They grow up under the leaves, the larvae from, butterflies, and, kind of stopping those worms before they even start to, come out of the cocoon and so forth, or even start to go through their whole, life cycle. Even if they do get through an entire life cycle to where they're at the worm stage, ladybugs eat those worms as well. So you probably always seen ladybugs come around gardens or in, grandma's old personal garden or her little garden she had on the ledge there on the porch. Well, that was for a reason, and she was very smart because she kind of knew the natural, remedy for stuff like that. You could take it a step further. Some people, put, about 100 praying mantises in their field as well. What you're basically doing is putting a natural ecosystem in place. So the theory is the ladybug eats the worms and aphids, and the praying mantises end up eating the ladybugs. Your ladybugs won't be an issue at harvest because the female eats the male after it mates. So they kind of, take themselves out eventually. So just a little nugget there for you to remember. Outside of that, we want to make sure that we're doing proper field maintenance, because this is what can happen if those worms start getting in there. worms start boring up in, you know, the buds, you know, and as the plant matures, and the next thing you know, they got nests in there, and you know, you get rain and hot weather and all that stuff, and you get bud rot and mold. That's no good at the market, and that can totally cause the value of your crop to go down. So what you want are good, healthy plants that are pruned as much as possible to get that airflow through there and allow those buds to really open up. So that's the vegetation stage. This is kind of like a good shot of a couple of 10-pound plants that we grew in our experimental plot. As you can see, we didn't have these on beds. We were seeing how much these plants can be fed, you know, and using different formulations of NPK. With these, we really put a lot of potassium to them in the flowering period when they start blossoming, and those suckers boomed out. So one thing I would tell you guys to do is, this is research. Whether the state takes it serious or not, you should take it serious, because these are just things that are going to help you eventually in the end. So pruning, if you do the right things, you'll have some nice plants. I said the flowering stage. So, you know, when it comes to flowering, this is what you really want to look at. Some of the same regiments are still in place as far as feeding, field monitoring, watering. You know, you get to flowering, this is what you're looking for. You're looking for those buds to come out all nice and pretty and everything. You're going to have a few leaves in that top cola. It's good to have them in there. Sometimes it's good to go ahead and pull them out. That's going to be something that's technical. It depends on how your field is performing overall and what you're looking to really make that plant do. When do we flower? Number one question. When do we harvest? Number one question. So when your flowers start, when they start flowering and coming out like that and putting on buds, you're going to notice the white hairs on there. That means that it's really doing well. If you got nice white hairs sticking up out of the bud like that, and they're going to be ready to harvest when those hairs start turning brown. What will cause that is the natural ultraviolet rays in the evening, morning and evening time. Those transition into the flower, and you'll definitely know when it's ready to start, you know, sending in your paperwork for harvesting. So, you know, that's why you're also going to need to make sure that you have your consultant with you, because they're going to be able to, you know, say, hey, we need to send in your request for a sample to the state so they can grant you the opportunity to harvest and things like that. So proper testing there, and doing your own individual testing during the season. We suggest that you do about 2 tests when you're in the flowering stage, so you can know what your CBD levels are, but more importantly, so you can know what your THC levels are. So, you know, if you need to be below 3% to pass state and federal guidelines, well, when it's at 2%, 1.9, you need to start looking at harvesting, because it could really shoot up on you within a couple of weeks. So that's something that you're going to need to have somebody, you know, with you, you know, making sure that you're on track with that. Outside of that, you know, the state, you know, samplers will come out and they'll get their samplers and handle it for you and take it back to the state lab and test it, and then give you permission to harvest your crop. So getting down to the end of this journey, you know, what do you need to know? You need to know a lot about when it comes to harvesting, right? You need to know when, where, how, and all that good stuff. Again, we already talked about when it's time to harvest. And you know that when you actually secure your labor, your field monitoring and maintenance, and also weather. I didn't put that on here, but weather is a big deal. So, you know, if it's rain, you need to wait a few days to kind of let your crop dry a little bit, because you don't want to take it in moist like that. You can get a lot of mold and things. But being able to harvest and bulk your biomass and then get it transported to a commercial dryer. Why a commercial dryer? Because it's to be dried to market specifications. This isn't something you can just hang in the barn, not if you're really trying to go to market with it. It needs to go to a commercial dryer so that they can dry to market specifications. And more importantly, and so you can make sure that it's completely dry and it doesn't rot on you. So sometimes those buds can appear to be dry, but they retain a lot of moisture inside. And what happens is, you know, if you got it in a grain sack or a super sack, you'll start to see the middle of it start rotting. And, you know, you're digging through your harvest bin in a couple of months and you're seeing all this mold and you're like, damn, I got to do all this. So definitely important to get it commercially dried. Some of the post-harvest things you'll need to do is make sure that you're doing your field destruction. So you'll have stalks left up in your field. We, for instance, dish ours back into the soil to get those natural nutrients back in there. We will have a couple of burn piles for some of the plants that, you know, may have gotten bud rotted or that, you know, got destroyed from, you know, a rain or whatever or lower. We just throw that stuff in the burn pile and burn it. You know, we let the state know, take pictures, send it in to them. You need to check with your individual state on how they want that done. But the main thing here is getting that full panel test. So after it's dried, you'll send it into the lab so that you can get all of your tests done. This is so that you can take it to market. It cannot be sold without a certificate of analysis. They're going to test mycotoxins. They're going to test for mold, pesticides. So remember when we talked about making sure that your soil was proper, it's not just so that you can stay within the pH of 6.7 to 7.1 at the most, but we don't want things in that soil, you know, that can, like heavy metals that could really throw off your test. That will, I mean, sometimes heavy metals can pass if you're making biomass because they can be extracted out of the oil. But if you're using it for smokable floral, it's not going to pass because you don't want people, you know, trying to smoke cadmium and arsenic and things of that nature from pollutants. So that certificate of analysis will let that processor, that buyer, that extractor know everything that's going on with that plant. It's almost like a, you know, CSI analysis in some respect. And it also lets you know what your CBD percentage is, what your THC percentage is. And we all know that your CBD percentage drives the cost of this biomass at market. So definitely something that you should definitely have. Outside of that, you know, put down a light cover crop. We always suggest that you do that. Not necessarily the way that we suggest that you space out your rows about, you know, be 6 to 8 feet apart so that you can get, you know, some good riding lawnmowers or your bush hog down through there for field maintenance. But also the next season that you grow, you can actually take that mulch and then move them over 4 feet. And now that becomes your new planting lane. So you don't have to necessarily, they say you need to rotate your fields every 6 to 7 years. Well, you can use that one field twice, you know, back and forth, and actually use that same plot for about 12 to 14 years, depending on how you do it. So just a few nuggets there. And after that, you want to, you know, get with your broker that you've got in place, your buyer, and you want to make sure that you get that money because that's when it's time to get paid. But everybody loves about that. So I hope you enjoy, you know, the journey through the grow season. It's a huge overview. Each topic could probably have an hour spent on it, and that still wouldn't be enough. But if you would like to discuss anything with me further, you can always reach out to me at dbranch@branchfarms.com, or you can call 501-358-HEMP. That's 4367. And if I don't answer, it's typically because I'm doing a webinar or on another call or out in the field or the lab. I could be in several different places, but I usually do return calls. So with that said, I am going to open it up for questioning and stop sharing. And I guess that TJ moderated from there.
Thank you, Datron. So if you have questions, I'm going to ask that you either raise your hand or put a note in the chat component, and I will call on you. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's probably better that you put a note in chat because I don't know that I can see if you raise your hand from my end. Brother Daytron, looks like you did a pretty powerful job because I'm not seeing anybody with any questions. I have a couple, or I have
Okay.
maybe some other folks may come up with some um, a little later on. You said that you use nutrients like Miracle Grow, but not to use it during the flowering stage.
Right.
Okay. And that's because what happens if you were to use it during that time frame? Is it just going to cause the plant to grow excessively or create
You would get
water issues?
you would get a lot of vegetation, number
Okay.
one. You know, so your buds, it's time for the buds to start putting on weight and for those nutrients to start really making those buds get, you know, big and dense. Obviously, the weight of, you know, your biomass is based on, you know, how the weight of your buds and so forth, right? You know, when you're doing your harvest, you do have to make sure that they're trimmed and well pruned, then bucked, so you're not getting a bunch of excess leaves in there that will cause it to be rejected, you know, from any buyer because they're not buying the weight based on leaves and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
the other thing is you don't want to run the plant hot. So when people are growing marijuana, one of the main ways that they get it to, you know, really go from, I guess, a low grade form of marijuana to a high grade
Great.
kush and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, is to boost it with nitrogen, you know. So unfortunately, and hopefully, you know, Joe and Kamala get this thing right where marijuana be recreational. Then it won't really matter to us hemp people because if it goes over 3%, and most of these plant varieties are going to have a max on the THC of about 6% at the most. You know, so even if you're over 3%, you'll still pass and it won't affect your crop. The last thing I would say about that is obviously, you know, you want to make sure that when you're in the flowering stage that you start putting more potassium in there. You could go with a 0010 formulation or 0020. And, you know, you don't want to do it for a long time. You want to boom it, you know, within the first couple of weeks with that. That potassium will help those, help that stalk get real strong so it can hold up the rest of the plant. And once you do that, you know, it just, you know, kind of entices that plant or enhances that plant's ability to put on more weight.
Appreciate that, my brother. You talked about harvest and the fact that you needed to get a consultant so that you can ensure that you had enough lead time to work with the state on the testing aspect of it so you can get your certification so you can harvest. And I know it's probably going to vary, or it's likely to vary state by state. But my question is, generally, how much lead time do you need to work with the state in order to ensure that you're able to get out and harvest when it's appropriate?
So, and you're spot on. That's a great question. Each state is differently, you know. So, for instance, in Kentucky, my friends up there, you know, they usually have a waiting line of about 3 weeks to a month. It's really kind of crazy. They just have so many people that have come on board. This is their fourth year, I believe, fourth year going into it strong. So basically, they haven't hired enough samplers to be able to basically service the whole state. And you're looking at, you know, the Appalachian Mountains, and now, you know, it's not like they're, you know, going across the Metroplex, for instance. You know, now you're driving some long country miles and so forth. For Arkansas, it's typically going to be about a 2-week period for you to let them know in advance. They can come within a week and tell you that you need, you know, you're good to go. But most of the time, you need to give them a scheduled harvest date because once they come out and take their sample, they give you exactly 2 weeks, 15 days, 2 weeks to harvest your whole field. If you don't harvest your whole field, you got to like submit for an exception. Or if, you know, the weather stops you, you know, like we did this year, they'll give you like a week, exception. They're pretty cool about that. The reason why they give you 2 weeks is because you can actually run hemp hot and make it legal marijuana, depending on how hot you ran it. So, for instance, if I wanted to run something hot, I'd just put a lot of nitrogen on it towards the end of it and everything, really make it boom out, flush it, and then I would probably let them come out and then keep it in the field about 3 or 4 weeks. So they have safety nets in place to stop all of that.
Okay. Rod, you on? I think Rod had a question.
Now, I think Miss Elizabeth asked the question of how do you get a reputable consultant? Well, I had 2 answers for that. First one is, don't ask John. Then again, ask John.
All I can say is go with my first choice.
Well, yes, I would agree with that. Unfortunately, what I found in this industry, if you talk to 10 people, you'll get 10 different answers, and there's a lot of fraud in the industry. There's a lot of people misrepresenting themselves, and there's also some folks who may have some knowledge, but then again, they're kind of winging it also, as with our experienced patron, as you know what's going on with us. So we've had some speed bumps and some hurdles to get over. We had bug issues. We've had excessive water issues. And we've had some folks who maybe have misrepresented themselves also. But thanks to Datron, we were on the right track. Hopefully was able to salvage some of the crop. They've actually harvested today, if I'm not mistaken. My brother went up to Texas earlier this week so that he could get harvested today. I think they got it all done, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't talked to him yet, but I'm more than sure I'll talk to him later on this evening once he gets out the field. But yeah, everything you had talked about, Datron, in your PowerPoints, I was shaking my head like, yep. There's a lot that you have to dot your I's and cross your T's if you want to get involved in this industry.
Yeah, the main thing is references. To give you a straightforward answer to that question, you definitely want to make sure that person can provide you with some legitimate references. So I'm saying legitimate. That person says that I have Roderick and TJ as farmers under me and so forth. Well, you're going to be able to go to that state's website and at least see if they're farmers, right? So they aren't giving you their cousin down the street. So definitely try to get references from farmers that they've consulted with. Another thing is making sure that person has the right connections, if they have the connections to the seedling tropicals, if they have connections to a legitimate buyer. Those are things that you can pretty much tell when you're looking for a legitimate consultant, because those are things that they should have access to. And by the way, the person that says that, I know how to grow this because I've been growing marijuana for years, or before you were born, when you were in diapers, that's probably a person you want to run away from, because this plant is totally different from marijuana plant. They're first cousins in the same family, but I think John has heard me say this before. We all got first cousins that we're totally opposite of, right? So these are these two plants are definitely bipolar to one another.
Yeah, you got to be careful not to mix the two as well, because one can cross-pollinate the other and cause or cannabis can cause hemp to go hot and test above level. Did you see that the legislation out there to actually increase the level of THC in hemp? I think Rand Paul put something out there to raise it from 0.03 to 0.75 or 0.75.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. Any other questions?
Again, Well,
I'm
that's
sorry.
because in Kentucky they've been having, Kentucky is kind of like I guess the center of, the Southeast region right now, the so-called center. A lot of their growers went hot, over the last couple of years. So, when your state, when you put a lot of political capital on the line, like he and McConnell did to get the law passed, and then you're not making any money because your rules and regulations are too, tight, then yeah, they're coming back loosening up those regulations now. At first it was at 5%, but now they're saying 7.5% so they can go to 5%. And I think that's typically, something they're using to basically just make everything full recreational.
Gotcha.
I think Rod has his hand up again.
Yeah, I think that was an accidental touch
Okay.
of the screen for me. I'm sorry about that.
I know John has something.
Yeah, we got Big John over there.
Yeah, let me ask this question a little bit off the topic, but this will be my first year to serve on the Agricultural Committee for the state of Indiana. What can I do, or what do I need to look for that would be helpful? January 4th to be my first day on the Agricultural Committee for the state of Indiana.
Okay. What would you need to look for in regards to hemp and the legislation of hemp there, or in what regard?
Hemp is not the only thing we will be growing. So right. Put my boots on. You tell me, should I just be looking for hemp? Should I be looking for how it can help in other areas? Because greens and green beans are still going to be growing too. So like, how do I, what's a rule of thumb that a person that knows nothing about farming, and I purposely got on the ag committee so I could be a help. John Jamerson has really educated me to a lot of this. So what I do on the agricultural committee, and I just need some guidance, really.
Yeah, that's not my strongest area, but what I would say, I guess, from a selfish standpoint regarding the hemp industry is making sure that those programs also include the industrial hemp program. What's happening right now with a lot of the subsidies that have been passed in agriculture, and we know it's billions and billions of dollars, they've only carved out a little bit, for the hemp industry, since it's, basically a new industry that's coming on board, but an industry with plenty of potential. So if this is our one shot as minorities to really do well with a crop with a smaller amount of land, right? So if you don't have the thousands of acres that Warren Buffett's son has, and a nice GPS tractor and all that good stuff, and then, that person can pretty much, do bad or have a derecho or whatever that storm was called come through there and get millions of dollars, in crop, damage and subsidies. Well, there's nothing out there for that same hemp farmer in that area who lost the same amount of crop, right? So I would say that you're going to have to probably, really fight, for, some subsidy money coming into your area locally, whether it's, on the county level or state level. But regardless, please have your voice be heard. Keep the African-American farmer in mind, and you can keep that farmer in mind by at least having a part in the equal level playing field with the hemp industry and making sure that those subsidies are available for hemp farmers as well.
Yeah, and to that end, I'm gonna call you, if it's okay, Big John as well, so we can differentiate between you and the other John. One of the things that John and I have talked about that he oftentimes emphasizes is we make up a certain percentage of the population. Mm-hmm. And so particularly when you think about Indiana, Indianapolis, those types of things, if you're 12%, 13% of the census of the state, then 12 to 13% of the funding should be allocated or coming towards that community as well. And I think ensuring, as Datron said, folks have access, a line of sight to the ability to participate early on, I think are some of the critical things, because oftentimes knowledge is power, and other folks find out things on the front end and get that leading edge from that standpoint. So,
Yeah, and that was part of what I was going to say also, is to you know, agriculture has such a broad scope as far as its reach, mining, chemicals, you name it, all that falls into agriculture. And these are things, especially in our urban communities and stuff, that our communities have no idea of anything that's in that. But that it's also an opportunity for those communities to be able to grow in those areas. And so I would say make sure, as TJ was saying earlier, that the information gets passed down as to what is coming about. Make sure that those who are trying to get into those spaces have a seat at the table, or at least an invite, and make sure that a lot of those good old boy things that are out there that prevents us from being able to move forward are removed. Everybody should have equal access and equal movability and ability to move as everybody else. And a lot of times there's alliances and things that are made on certain levels that block other people out, because by the time the information gets to us that they're having a hemp board, they're having this, that, and the other, we have no representation there, and we're blocked out. And so I'm glad to hear that you're on. So I'm gonna be pulling at your coattail every now and then and throwing a few things at you. So I'm happy to see that you're on, and I look forward to doing some good stuff. So anything that I can do to assist, let me know. Shauna, I haven't heard anything from you. You're on mute.
Me?
I think it's talking to Shauna, if she had any questions.
Yeah, just trying to see if she had any questions. MD, you got any questions?
I already put mine in the chat, and Rod answered it about the consultant. Yeah.
All right.
So if I can, Jay, I've got one closing question for Datron. You talked about destruction of crops. Mm-hmm. And I understand if a crop tests hot, that states oftentimes will have you destroy them, and they will have, some of them will want to allocate that crop and destroy it themselves versus you destroying it. But I was surprised, I guess, a little bit that if you have damaged crop, dry rot, you create that burn pile, that you still have to report that. Mm-hmm. And so can you speak to that a little bit, and what are the consequences?
Sure. So what you'll find out when you go through a full year of doing paperwork with any state is that they track everything. They track every pound. So as a processor, dealing with 14, farmers, including our own fields, and a couple of farmers have multiple fields. You've got to keep track of everything. So when we take it in, our numbers have to match up with whatever paperwork numbers that they have, which is kind of why I took it upon myself to do a lot of the administrative paperwork for the whole network, so that we made sure that everything is consistent, because we figured that we'd probably have a spotlight on us being the largest group in the state, and being African American. So we've done well with our paperwork. This year was the first year we had somebody go hot. Obviously, we do the drying and storage at our facility. So they actually came out yesterday, and my dad met them at the facility. We were going to actually take it across the river about 15 miles to our fields and burn it. But they was like, hey, dude, if you don't need your sack, and we had it in the super sack, we'll just take it back and burn it at the state office. So they just took it back and burned it there. So they want to track every pound that you harvest. And the reason being is a lot of, in the underground market, there's a lot of hemp out there. A lot of people perpetrating, hemp as marijuana, it's not, uncommon to have a couple of plants stolen up out of a field, and people try to, take it, back to the house and dry it and cure it or whatever, and pass it as marijuana on the streets. You even have to report loss of crop in that regard. So what you're talking about, any type of crop loss, crop destruction from bud rot or whatever the case may be, that stuff definitely has to be destroyed, and the state has to be aware of it. Taking photos is even good after they give you the okay, once you turn in your field destruction form, just so you have that proof.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I know we got a couple people who just jumped in at the last couple minutes. Gabriel Mosley and Tamika. We've had Datron, which Branch Farms, who's been doing a presentation on getting ready to grow when it comes to hemp. Gabriel, you're out there in Texas, right?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm here in Texas.
Now, are you guys doing any? Are you growing any hemp at this time?
No, not at this time.
Are you looking at doing that in the future?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. Maybe 1 or 2 years down the road.
Okay. All right. Well, this will be a good video. We will put this on line for everybody to be able to review the interview and everything. I know that Datron has another meeting coming up in about 6-7 minutes. So we're going to just wanted to make sure that that anybody had who might have a question real quick to ask him, and then we'll let him close out. So if there's any one last second question for Datron.
I didn't necessarily have a question. This is Shauna Kidd. I'm from Detroit. I was in the grocery store listening, so I couldn't unmute myself when you called on me.
Okay.
But I'm in Detroit, and we're primarily focusing on the cannabis industry, and we grow indoors. We don't grow outdoors. And I just wanted to. I joined this evening because I wanted to hear a different perspective, and see some of the differences, in the grow, and just collect that little bit of information. So that was my primary reason for jumping on here. It was quite interesting, and growing is growing is growing.
Yeah.
So there's some things that are consistent, across the board. So, excuse me. So I just, I was just going to go ahead and chime in since you called my name.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you were able to get on, and look forward to seeing you on our future. We have these every third Thursday where we have a special guest that's on Topics vary each time. Could be anybody from someone from the USDA to someone who's in a certain field, or could be talking about the tax, the Justice for Black Farmers bill. It could be anything. So we have experts in the field. We try to make sure that our people have an opportunity to be able to have access to those experts and to share with our communities, those who are from our community that have those experts. So, you know, we're about promoting our own. And so thank you for coming.
You're welcome. And you know, that's across the board, because I'm a member of Black Cannabis Access.
Okay.
And that's primarily, you know, what we do. We're about making sure that we have an in this industry, that we are represented. If we have to go together, you know, the plan is always to go together, because in numbers, you can do more than just one person, you know, individually getting out there and trying to build out $1 million grow. You know, 10 or 20 of us can come together and get it done, you know, more efficiently. So we've recently bought a building, and we're going to open a hydroponic supply store.
Well, that sounds great. That's with Mitzi, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, she's one of my first interviews that I did with for Dr. Boyce Watkins a few years ago. So yeah, I'll have to touch base with her. We'd love to have you guys come on and share some of the information that you guys are doing. So with that being said, let me allow Datron to go. Datron, you still have that meeting?
Yeah, I do. I got a couple more minutes though. You're
okay.
Fine.
All right. I didn't want to hold you back and have you.
No, you're fine.
Ghost on us. So
no, you're
give
fine.
you an opportunity to say any closing remarks on your end.
Yeah, you know, it's always a pleasure to kind of go over the ins and outs of the growing season, you know, and talk about it. Obviously, this is what I do for a living. It's one of my passions. And like I said, if you do have any follow-up questions, or anyone that you know that is interested in growing hemp, we definitely like to point them in the right direction.
All right. Thank you. And if you would please give them your phone number and stuff again.
Absolutely. So let me just
yeah, you can share your
go
screen.
My phone number. Okay. Yeah.
If you got it back on there.
Okay, sure. Let's see here. Is everybody able to see that?
There you go.
Yes.
Okay. Yep. So it's dbranch@branchfarms.com, and phone number 501-358-HEMP. That's 4367.
All right. Well, thank you, brother. I've been impressed with you since I came out there to Arkansas, me and my son, a couple years ago, and came out and saw his fields and what he was doing. At that time, he was just putting in his processor, and been wanting to get back out there to see the processor and see it working, but COVID made a change in plans for this past year. So hopefully next year we can get out there and check you out and see how you're doing. I'm glad to see that you still moving forward. And that's the thing.
Yeah. Also, if you don't mind, I'd like to put in a shameless plug real quick. So, we do have our CBD oil tinctures. We have our full spectrum and broad spectrum. Full spectrum, full cannabinoids, less than 1.8 THC is what ours has tested out at. So very minor amount of cannabinoids, and we have our broad spectrum, which is THC free for those that have to take drug tests. Not that full spectrum will catch you up in the drug test, but we want to make sure that, you know, we're absolutely sure. So we have full spectrum and broad spectrum. You can support us by going to branchfarms.com, BRANCHPHARMS.com. Thank you for allowing me to be shameless.
All right, thank you.
Well, I'm glad you did that shameless plug, because at our hydroponic growth store, we also like